As we go through this short file, I want to talk about some of the socio-historical elements, areas we find points of similarity, also points of difference. Then we'll go into areas of points of comparison. Some of this will be reading, pretty well all of it will be reading from what's on the screen and just trying to draw that out a little bit more. These are obviously the elements you're going to need to be able to reference to when it comes to talking about the text, especially the last few slides. But these give us our socio-historical perspective as well. Points of similarity between Sophocles and Euripides themselves, as in the men. Sophocles, born in 496, a colonist near Athens, and he dies in 406 in Athens. Euripides, born 484, so a little bit later, he died as well in 406 in Macedonia. He departed Athens in the 23rd year of the Peloponnesian War. So he got out of there a little bit earlier than that, and he wrote the Bacchae when he was actually up in Macedonia, which is interesting given it's a play about a god that's sort of an outsider, is assumed to come from outside, from the east in the tradition. Both men were children, though Sophocles was a bit older at the time of the Persian Wars. Euripides wasn't born at the start of the Persian Wars. The stories of the heroics of the Greeks, the sacrifices made, would have been well known to them. They would have grown up around these stories, much as kids in the 1940s grew up around the stories of Gallipoli and the Somme. They would have known the heroics of the Greeks, and the sacrifices would have been well known to them, as would knowledge of the destruction of the war, the burning of Athens. Sophocles in particular would remember that destruction in 480 BCE by Xerxes of Persia as vengeance for the earlier defeats of the Persians. Sophocles came from a wealthy family. His father was an armourer, so he made armour, and he received, Sophocles that is, received a good education. So he was of note in society. Of Euripides, we don't know as much. There's some indirect evidence that he also came from a wealthy family, but none of that's too sure. But he was certainly socially connected. As their careers developed, so did that of the important Pericles. Pericles underpins of both of these gentlemen, and the Golden Age, the mid-Golden Age especially. Both men were at the height of their respective careers in the Golden Age of Athens. Also the height of science and maths, of art, as in the visual arts as well. Both men saw the rebuilding of the Acropolis, in particular the Parthenon, Athens' crowning glory. It was a sense of great pride within Athens, a sense of power, and some say, outsiders would have said, a sense of entitlement. Both men saw the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War in 431. Both plays were written and performed in the Athens classical age, and both men died before the fall of Athens. So these, in a socio-historical aspect, these are points of comparison. Okay, let's have a look at a few points of difference. First of all, at Antigone from Sophocles. Antigone was produced in 441, so much earlier than Electra. This is 6 years after the reconstruction of the Parthenon was commenced. That was completed by 431. In this time, Athens was at its cultural and its political height. Athens was very powerful. Pericles was also at his height politically. So there was very much an era of strength. It's about power, which plays into the Creon sort of ideas pretty well. This play was performed 10 years before the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War. So it's between the wars. There's always tensions going on, but they've won, they've defeated Persia, they've seen off Persia, they're getting rich, the Parthenon, the Acropolis is being rebuilt. Athens is feeling very superior. Their arts, their culture are exploding. There seems like nothing they can't do. In 441, Sophocles was one of 9 generals elected with Pericles for a campaign against the revolt of Samos. There's a hyperlink there that if you want to find a little bit more information, was somebody who challenged the Delian League. The Delian League was the source of wealth for the Athenian Empire, and it was important in order that others didn't break away from the empire that was crushed. And it was crushed. It was a crisis in the unity of the Delian League. Creon's speech that he makes in Antigone in regards to defending the city, this was mentioned a fair bit as we read through the play as well. It foreshadows that of Pericles in his funeral oration 10 years later. Perhaps, I think this is likely, indicating that these were not uncommon ideas. This wasn't something that Pericles magically thought of himself, that these were established codes of what was appropriate and what sort of sacrifices a citizen would be expected to make for their polis. So we've looked at the socio-historical elements that are particular to Antigone. Now let's have a look at the elements that are particular to Electra. Electra is produced much later, in 417. Euripides is a much older man, maybe wiser, maybe not, but he's certainly much older than Sophocles would have been when he produced Antigone. Pericles had died 12 years earlier. Cleon, who had taken over from Pericles as the dominant political figure in Athens, had died 5 years earlier. Tensions were present with Milos, who was supporting Sparta, leading to the siege of Milos the year after. That was the siege of Milos was the Melian dialogue. For those that did 1-2 last year would have looked at the Melian dialogue. If you're not familiar with it, it's worth having a bit of a look at. It certainly indicates the tension between the political and the community in Athens, the political force and the community. Not everyone in Athens was happy with how their generals handled the Melian dialogue. They saw themselves as the leading culture in the community, in the empire, as being capable of behaving better than they did with Milos. The Peloponnesian War was in full flight. Sparta, led by Agis II, won the major battle. This led to the Battle of Hysia, the year after, where Sparta had another decisive victory. So things weren't going well for Athens. Sparta had a number of decisive victories. Athens has endured 14 years of war to date, plus plague. Plague is the initial plague at 430 that kills Pericles. They assume he died of plague, but plague tends to recur as well. There were other occurrences of it. Alcibiades was prominent in waging war against Sparta. So politically, there was a lot of tension within Athens at the same time. For Antigone, politically, things were pretty stable. Pericles was at its peak. There were no wars. It's amazing how when you haven't got enemies at the gate, everyone's pretty happy. The alliance history of Alcibiades and his interest in his loyalty wavered. He spends time in Sparta, he spends time with the Persians, he's all over the place. And he still ends up being an important Athenian general later on. 422, Nisus was leader. He sought peace with Sparta. The shaky peace of Nisus lasted 6 years, covering the period of Electra. It was pretty, as I said, shaky. There were still lots of tensions. There were still running battles. Until 415, Athens launched a massive assault against Sicily. Sparta was making approaches to Sicily, and they saw Sicily, that was their side of the Mediterranean, and it was certainly considered an aggressive move by Athens to launch an assault against Sicily. That assault against Sicily was an absolute disaster and restarted the war. So you can see why maybe Euripides was pretty keen to get the hell out of there and move north. In 411, Athens was a political mess. So a little bit after Electra now. Democracy was overthrown by the oligarchical party, so an oligarchy, a powerful few, which was replaced by the 5,000, which was chaotic as well. In 411, the Athenian navy, feeling confident from some victories, restored democracy. So the generals came in. However, the democratic leaders refused Spartan peace offerings. They had a chance to stop it there. The military wanted to accept the peace offerings. The democratic leaders refused it. In 405, the Athenian navy was destroyed, and a year later, Athens fell. So Electra is produced in that atmosphere. We're getting the beginning of the end. They're in political turmoil, and the wars aren't going too well for them. They had their victories in amongst this time as well, but they were certainly always fighting Sparta on their own ground. So that wasn't going well from that point of view as well. So Electra is produced in this time of calling out for good leaders in a time of chaos, in a time of confusion. Antigone produced at a time of stability, in a time of questioning. Alright, let's have a look. Next 3 slides, the last 3 slides, we're looking at points of comparison. So both plays speak to the duty to family. Come to burial rites and things like that later, and we talked about burial rites quite a bit during the reading, and there was the article in your anthology that also references the importance of burial rites. Once they are dead, they are the possessions of Hades. We'll come back to that. So, both plays speak to the duty to family. Both have powerful female figures, royal virgins who seek justice for their male king. They're both the same in this. Virgins are very special in this context, as they've got the least to lose. They don't have husbands, they don't have children. This allows them to focus on other men in their lives and their responsibilities to them, their brothers, their fathers. They're not conflicted at all. So they've got that sole focus. Both royal virgins are not allowed to enter into the normal spaces in the plays. Antigone in post-Civil War Thebes, and Electra is in the barren countryside. So Antigone at the end is put into the tomb alive, and Electra is exiled out to the barren countryside to live with the farmer. Both women are moral agents whose actions backfire against them. What that term means is that they were acting according to a set of rules. In the case of Antigone, honouring the dead, honouring her brother. And the citizens, the chorus, acknowledge this is correct. Everyone acknowledges it is correct, except even Creon does it by the end, once he's got over his arrogance. But it's too late by then, the damage is being done. For Electra, the moral agent in her is to justify the killing of her father, of a blood crime. Ironically, she commits a blood crime in avenging a blood crime, but also the killing of a king. But so they're both moral agents, and their actions backfire against both of them. Antigone, in her attempts to bury her brother, she gets arrested and condemned to death, as Creon promised to do. And Electra, she and her brother, Orestes, kill their mother together. They then regret their actions and feel polluted afterwards. Orestes goes into exile, and Electra is pushed into marriage with her cousin, Pylades, who is Orestes' companion. So it goes pear-shaped for both women. Neither woman has any social or political power to achieve their goals. Antigone, she resorts to unapologetic daring, like recklessness, you might say. She's just going to barge through head first. Tells her sister to go to hell. She's just going to barge on through and do it. Electra is a little bit more tactful, in a sense. She resorts to deception. She plans a bit more, thinks it through. Antigone, she represents the rights and the obligations of the family. Sophocles justifies her actions through Tiresias' advice to Creon. Tiresias says it's right. The chorus say it's right. Even Creon in the end agrees that he's made the wrong decision in his anger. So Antigone represents those rights and obligations, but she still must pay a price. other points of comparison? Both women believe in a heroic world governed by divine laws, but it's not a world that exists for them. They aren't going to get the justice fully that they're after, not without consequence. Antigone believes she is upholding divine laws, and she is, the rights to burial, and that she will win good fame from the people of Thebes. But no one comes to help her, not even her own sister. People might believe it's right. They're not going to defy Creon to do it. Electra believes her brother Orestes will arrive openly and kill Aegisthus and their mother. Instead, he comes in disguise, stabs Aegisthus in the back, and hesitates to kill their mother. He's not the knight in shining armour, the great avenging hero that comes and kills them and takes over the rights of the city that they were hoping to get. Antigone, the play, is a struggle between two worldviews. There's the rights of the family and the rights of the state. Although Creon's view wins at first, that's because of his political power. Antigone's view is eventually proven just by good old Tiresias. So there's this tension going on between these two ideas. The idea of the rights of the city, and we've talked about this before, and the rights of the duty that's due to the gods. So there's these two worldviews in conflict here. And it's a proud house that's going to be broken. So in Electra, we see this struggle between Electra's own obsessive and skewed view of the world and what really is true. Like, she's very much laments her situation. Yet the chorus, at one stage, are offering her jewellery and beautiful clothes. She's got a servant. The farmer says, why are you carrying the pot? You've got to make the servant do it. Oh no, I'll do it. So she's a bit of a martyr. The play is full of disillusionment, as in things aren't quite as they say they are. Disappointment and surprises. I even go to the point of Odysseus. He's characterised as this horrendous man who dances on tombs and does all these terrible sacrilegious things, and he's just an awful, awful person. Yet, first of all, he's off doing honorific sacrifices to the gods. He invites in a stranger to take part in the sacrifice and the feast, and his wife is coming along to that. He seems quite amiable, friendly, not arrogant. So things aren't quite as they seem. Electra has an agenda, and she's going to put forward that agenda no matter what it takes. Both women are stubborn, terribly stubborn, and they're unwilling to take advice. It's their way, or not at all. They're both convinced that they're the target of disdain, that others are mocking them, that others are deriding them, that others think less of them. They're willing to discuss their emotions openly. Electra talks quite openly in front of the chorus, and Antigone talks quite openly as well. They're willing to discuss those emotions blatantly and to perform lament, as in feeling sorry for themselves and others, but essentially themselves, how they've been brought low. There's the characterisation of their opponents. Creon, is he a tyrant? Or is he just a misguided politician trying to do his best for the state? They're in a state of civil war. They've had brothers killing each other outside the gates. One defending the city, the other one attacking. Do you really do you honour your enemy in a state of civil war? So there's that characterisation of Creon. He actually comes to reason, but Antigone, in her rush of emotion, in her heightened emotional state, she acts so quickly to kill herself once she's put into the tomb. If she'd only sat there and sulked a bit longer, she probably would have been let out. Would have ruined a perfectly good tragic formula, but she had options there, at least to hold out for a little while. So, is he a tyrant, or is he just misguided who got caught up in the heat of the moment? Clytemnestra, is she an adulteress who deserves to die, or a grief-stricken mother? Remember, her daughter was sacrificed so Agamemnon could go off on his jaunt with his brother and sack Troy. So, is she an adulteress who deserved to die, or is she a grief-stricken mother who feels regrets? Maybe placing Electra out where she placed her is protecting her as Agamemnon's daughter.